An overwhelming number of scientists and experts have all pointed at climate change as the most serious threat to the continued existence of human life on Earth. There are two main approaches to deal with this dangerous development. There is the mitigation approach, which attempts to permanently eliminate or at least reduce the long-term risk and hazards of climate change to human life and property. There is also the adaptation approach, which refers to the ability of humans throughout the world to adjust to climate change, to moderate potential damage, to take advantage of opportunities created, and ideally, to cope with the consequences. Around 500 policymakers, scientists, and representatives of Asia-Pacific governments, together with representatives from bilateral and multilateral donors, gathered at one of the biggest climate adaptation events ever witnessed in the region, the Asia-Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Forum 2010, held on October the 21st and 22nd at the United Nations building in Bangkok, Thailand. Participants discussed adaptation strategies and the challenges that we, as stewards of the Earth, face in trying to deal with the predicted hazards ahead. 2 days before the start of the forum, a press conference was held at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand.
This forum is trying to bring the different people from the different group with the different understanding and the learning, and to share their experiences among others.
Some of the questions from the audience expressed great concern about this most pressing issue.
Why do we need to split the message? Trying to say, well, there's climate change adaptation and there's mitigation.
We need to do both. There is not an either-or situation. The key message is to not compound that problem by continuing business as usual, because the longer we take to do anything about the mitigation measures, then the more serious and the more difficult the adaptation part of the story becomes.
The first day of the Adaptation Forum 2010 focused on general approaches and large-scale financing of climate change adaptation. The second day concentrated on the details of adaptation governance, on how to mainstream adaptation into development planning, and on the importance of effective knowledge management. Participants debated the critical issues of how to best approach climate change adaptation and how to integrate adaptation into development. Plenaries were held in the main UN conference hall, where all participants gathered. Here are some highlights of the opening plenaries.
We can state with confidence that climate change is the defining challenge of our times for all countries in the world, and particularly for developing countries in Asia and the Pacific.
The Asia-Pacific Adaptation Network forms part of the Global Adaptation Network. It is a critical node, and it was indeed the pioneer in this Global Adaptation Network that began to put in place a means and a platform by which we could bring scientists, policymakers, experts, civil society representatives and the private sector together around the table.
Government of Japan and IGES are happy to support, together with CENSA, ADB, UNEP and other organizations, this regional endeavor, hand in hand with many participants we see in this forum.
We need to do this together, to push for action at all levels, through all actors, public and private. Let us look for the good news, using that to show those blocking progress that change is happening.
Our fourth adaptation project is a significant one because it aims at integrating climate change adaptation into the key sectors of our economy.
Ladies and gentlemen, for Thailand, I wish to assure you that we take adaptation at heart, and we are ready to lend further support to this kind of activities. As an old saying goes, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
ADB will commit to support APAN and help policymakers and stakeholders gain better access to adaptation knowledge, which they can apply in the development and adaptation policies, programs and projects.
Afterwards, participants took part in breakout sessions where discussions were held on more specific issues. Theme number 1 in the parallel sessions featured discussions on science and policy and the inherent challenges of creating new development legislation, considering the uncertainty surrounding the future impact of climate change.
You need policy level support, you need larger programs, you need different body of knowledge, creating new knowledge, research institutions, and the linkages of that new knowledge being generated.
Who, in your opinion, might be the driving force of bringing all stakeholders together? Thank you.
You know, it has to be done at the level of the government, at the level of the international community, at the level of the regional interaction, cooperation, at the level of course, national government, which is the strongest amongst all these, and then at the local level.
Theme number 2 explored how the government, the private sector, and civil society can work together with respect to climate change adaptation. This is the most challenging issue since major gaps between the different sectors still remain when it comes to climate change policy.
When I mean sectors, I mean it across the spectrum that needs to be brought together.
We must prioritize the actions in different sectors.
We have to work across the sectors, because if we don't, then the possibility, the likelihood of what we call maladaptation will increase.
There's also another critical dimension, is to ensure that information is public.
Firstly, integration is important, but secondly, it's not a magic bullet. It's not the only answer, it's not a panacea. And thirdly, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Theme number 3 focused on finance adaptation measures, what mechanisms are available, and how to achieve adequate funding for these mechanisms.
This climate change battle is going to be won or lost here in Asia and the Pacific. And there's a great urgency in our dealing with this issues.
Which countries are selected? Do we prioritize the least developed countries? Which channels are used? Are they existing funds, bilateral, multilateral, or this new green fund?
In what form the adaptation finance will be, because I think there is still a disagreement, whether it should be loan or only grant, or it can be both.
To answer the question about grants or loans, loans are not eligible. Absolutely not eligible. They are not acceptable to the developing countries. Only grants are acceptable.
Theme number 4 dealt with the scientific data with regard to climate change and how to communicate this to the actual affected communities.
We must not forget traditional knowledge, particularly when we talk about adaptation, adapting to changes. In this region, we have thousands of years, millennium of knowledge.
Scientists are not in charge. It's essentially science as a servant of the process, where the process is decision-making around adaptation.
You need to have 3 or 4 people working on the ground together, and that is the challenge, working in transdisciplinary way with social scientists and economic scientists.
There are certain limitations, certain physical limits on how we can project future climate. Even from the pictures nice pictures we draw of these linear changes, these are just projections, they're not predictions.
There was a nearly universal expectation that, given a few more years or a decade or two, we're going to have a handle on that uncertainty. We've been talking to climate scientists, and they're nowhere near as confident that that's likely to be the case.
Theme number 5 was concerned with the relationship between those who are vulnerable and how this can be measured in order to properly allocate resources and to plan effectively for potential problems in the communities that will be most affected.
Climate change adaptation is also a justice issue that asks us to emphasize participation, think through dimensions of fairness in how adaptation benefits are distributed.
We have to ask why these people had to choose to become vulnerable. Without that, we cannot find solutions at the intersection of top-down and bottom-up.
Now, when we refer to ecosystem-based solutions, I wanted to just raise a little flag of caution here, since it's often referred to as low cost, quote unquote. That may be true, but what we should worry about is the net benefit to intervention.
At the close of the first day, climate change experts wrapped up the discussions and conclusions made during the plenaries and breakout sessions.
We have to extend our own activities in not only the physical processes, but also socio-economic system should be incorporated.
So in this effort to increase access to information, promoting and improving exchange of adaptation knowledge, experience and tools in the region, a web portal has been designed and developed.
There are so many stakeholders represented here. We've heard a diversity of ideas, reflections, discussions, deliberations today.
The second day, a panel debate explored the issue of mainstreaming climate change adaptation and who to engage in the process, whether it be specific government planning departments, financial units, or whether the issue needs to be addressed across all sectors.
How localized are programs and projects? How prepared are governments in mainstreaming? What are the mistakes that need not be repeated?
Our intentions may be right, but most of the adaptation measures that we are taking now may be really maladaptations.
Let us not use uncertainty to justify procrastinating action.
Climate change and adaptation issues are a very important and central challenge, but we mustn't lose sight of the overall challenges in terms of equitable development and NDG achievement.
If we don't perhaps mainstream by working closely with government planners at all levels, I think we'll run the risk of becoming a cottage industry, being very busy, researching and consulting, but not actually adapting.
At the closing plenary, experts spoke to synthesize the conclusions drawn from the 2 days.
Adaptation to climate change can be about building adaptive capacity, or it can be about transforming that capacity into particular specific actions.
From now on, I feel that we have a much larger audience and much larger partnership into going to the next steps.
I would just like to place on record a sincere thanks to all the partners. Again, numbers, 8 partners, starting of course with SENSA, UNEP, SEI, ADB, the Ministry of Environment, Japan, UNDP, and IGES.
At the very end, as a special treat, the popular Swedish international singer Meja addressed the audience through a pre-recorded video where she sang an acoustic version of her hit song, All About the Money.
It will take some time for us to answer really what is adaptation, what distinguishes it from development, how do we fund it, how do we do it, how do we gain the appropriate science and knowledge to improve our adaptation actions. But we're on the beginning of a very good path and the level of enthusiasm is extremely high.
I think the forum in itself can inspire people to take action. We can learn from each other and we can make sure that people with different background and different interests come together and find common ground.
And we see also an increased interest among the younger generation on issues related to sustainable livelihood, sustainable lifestyle, so that they are also a changing force, a catalyst.
Climate change, that's something that will influence the whole society. Everybody will be affected by it. And you can see today that almost every people are affected by it and would like to do something.